Simon Blackburn. Think. A compelling introduction to philosophy. Have you ever wondered how we know what we know? Why we're conscious? Or if we really have free will? Think explores life's biggest themes: knowledge, truth, justice, and more, through the lens of philosophy. In this blink, we'll demystify complex concepts of philosophy, making them accessible and relevant to anyone curious about the nature of reality and our place in it. By engaging with the insights of great thinkers, you'll gain tools to understand and tackle some of the greatest philosophical questions of our time. Think offers not just knowledge, but a transformative way to view the world and your own mind. So, if you're ready, let's dive in. What do we know? Ever wondered if the world around you is real or just a dream? The unsettling idea that everything might be a mere illusion has intrigued thinkers for centuries. Philosophers have long sought to understand the nature of knowledge and reality and discover how to navigate the line between doubt and certainty. René Descartes, a French philosopher and mathematician, famously questioned the reliability of our senses and the very existence of the world. In his Meditations on First Philosophy, he posed the idea that an evil demon could be manipulating our perception, making everything we experience a lie. Descartes used this thought experiment to show that we can never be certain of knowledge derived from our sensory experience. However, this method of extreme doubt also eventually led him to the conclusion, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. This statement asserts that while we can doubt everything, the act of thinking itself is undeniable proof of our existence. While our senses can deceive us, our intellect helps us understand the essence of things. For instance, a piece of wax can drastically change appearance depending on temperature. Yet we're smart enough to understand that cold and heated wax are essentially the same substance. Descartes argues that clear and distinct ideas, perceived through the intellect rather than the senses, form the basis of true knowledge. He also explores the nature of the self. In the absence of a body, what remains is the thinking self, an elusive, non-corporeal entity. Descartes posits the idea that this self is a perfect being within us that must have a cause equal to its perfection. This leads him to conclude that God exists and ensures our clear and distinct perceptions are true. While this argument has faced criticism, it underscores the challenge of establishing a secure foundation for knowledge. Ultimately, Descartes' work sets the stage for ongoing philosophical debates about the reliability of our senses, the nature of the self, and the existence of an external world. His exploration encourages us to question our assumptions and seek a deeper understanding of the structures that shape our perception of reality. How do our minds work? How do we truly understand another person's experience? This question has perplexed philosophers for centuries. Descartes suggested that our minds and bodies are fundamentally distinct, introducing the concept of substance dualism. This idea posits that mental events, such as thoughts and sensations, belong to a different kind of substance than physical events, like movements and reactions. Thus, while others can observe your physical actions, only you can experience your mental states. Descartes' view is often referred to as the ghost in the machine concept, where our consciousness is like a ghostly presence within the physical body. For example, while people can see someone react to pain, they cannot feel that pain themselves. This distinction raises the question of how we can be sure that others have conscious experiences similar to our own. Philosophical thought experiments, such as the famous zombie and mutant possibilities, challenge our assumptions about consciousness. There could be zombies out there, for instance, that look and behave like humans but lack any conscious experience. Or there might be mutants who are conscious but experience sensations completely differently than we do. These scenarios highlight the difficulty of knowing whether others perceive the world as we do, leading to significant epistemological challenges. One way philosophers have tried to address this problem is through the argument of analogy, suggesting that because others behave like us, they must have similar mental experiences. However, this argument is weak, as it is based on assumptions rather than evidence. German mathematician and philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz argued against the idea that the connection between physical events and mental experiences is arbitrary. Instead, Leibniz proposed that there must be a rational relationship between the two, much like the relationship between a circle and its projection as an ellipse. This suggests that mental events are expressions of physical states. Modern philosophers have attempted to bridge the gap between the mind and body through approaches like logical behaviorism and functionalism. Logical behaviorism posits that mental states are defined by observable behavior and behavioral dispositions, reducing psychological phenomena to physical actions and reactions. Functionalism, on the other hand, asserts that mental states are characterized by their functional roles or causal relations within a system, regardless of the physical substrate implementing them. These theories define mental states in terms of their functions and behaviors, aiming to make the relationship between physical and mental states more comprehensible. However, these approaches face challenges, such as explaining the subjective nature of experiences like pain, which vary widely among individuals. Some scientific models attempt to equate mental states with physical brain states, similar to how temperature is defined by molecular motion. Yet, this perspective struggles with the subjective nature of consciousness, which seems resistant to straightforward physical explanations. Ultimately, these explorations reveal the profound complexity of the human mind. That's why philosophers often talk about the hard problem of consciousness. Do we have free will? How free are we in our choices? Are our actions determined by a chain of prior events, or do we possess genuine free will? Many philosophers have delved into these profound questions by exploring the concepts of determinism, freedom, and responsibility. The notion of free will suggests that we make choices from a range of possibilities. For instance, choosing to go to the mountains for a holiday instead of the beach feels like a true exercise of freedom. We take pride in our ability to control our actions, fight against obsessions, and deserve praise or blame based on our choices. However, determinism challenges this view, positing that every event is the inevitable result of preceding causes governed by the laws of nature. So, if our actions are simply the outcomes of these predetermined events, is our sense of freedom just an illusion? Determinism presents a dilemma. If everything is predetermined, then our actions are not truly free. On the other hand, introducing randomness does not solve the problem either. If every event was random, it would equally strip us of control and responsibility. So the dilemma remains. Determinism denies freedom, and even randomness fails to restore it. This philosophical puzzle can be illustrated by considering a fig tree criticized for not bearing fruit out of season. Just as it is irrational to blame the tree for not producing figs in winter, it might be irrational to blame ourselves for actions determined by factors beyond our control. German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer likened our belief in free will to water believing it can boil without heat. Our perceived freedom may be a misunderstanding of the complex causes behind our own actions. Mind-body dualism offers another perspective. It posits a non-physical self that directs our actions. However, this does not solve the problem either. Whether it is physical determinism or the randomness of a non-physical soul, the challenge remains. How can true freedom exist in a deterministic framework? Compatibilism, however, attempts to reconcile determinism with free will. It suggests that even within a deterministic framework, we can act freely if our actions result from our own internal processes, such as deliberation and decision-making. For example, if someone's actions result from their decision-making modules, they are responsible, even if those modules were shaped by prior events. This view maintains that we can be held accountable for our actions, justifying praise and blame. However, the concept of responsibility becomes complex when considering factors like brainwashing or external manipulation. For instance, if mini-Martians were to control our decision-making processes, we would be seen as puppets rather than free agents. This raises questions about the true nature of our control and the extent to which we can be held responsible for our actions. Yet compatibilism provides a nuanced view that acknowledges the deterministic nature of the universe while preserving a sense of responsibility and agency. It argues that our freedom lies in our ability to respond to new information and adjust our actions accordingly. This flexibility distinguishes humans from mere mechanical beings and justifies us holding each other accountable for our actions. Who are we? In order to explore the concept of the self, we must delve into philosophical perspectives on identity and continuity. Scottish philosopher David Hume argued that the self is elusive and unobservable, composed only of perceptions and experiences. He suggests that when we look inward, we find only a bundle of thoughts and feelings, not a distinct self. This idea challenges the notion of a simple, indivisible soul that can exist independently of physical changes. His compatriot Thomas Reid, on the other hand, insisted that the self is simple and indivisible. He argued that personal identity remains constant despite changes in our physical state or memories. For Reid, the self endures through time and cannot be divided into parts. This perspective supported traditional views of the soul's immortality, asserting that if the soul is not composite, it cannot decay or change. English philosopher and physician John Locke provided a different angle by emphasizing the continuity of consciousness as the basis for personal identity. He argued that a person at one time is the same as a person at an earlier time, if they share the same consciousness. This view has practical implications, especially in legal contexts, where responsibility and accountability rely on the continuity of consciousness. However, it faces challenges, such as the problem of amnesia or partial memory loss. Is a person who loses part of their memory not really themselves anymore? German philosopher Immanuel Kant built on Hume's and Locke's ideas, proposing that self-consciousness is a requirement for interpreting experiences. He suggested that the I is necessary for organizing perceptions into a coherent representation of the world. This I is not an observable entity, but a formal point of view essential for understanding our experiences. These different musings on the nature of the self highlight that while our intuitions about personal identity may be clear and determinate, philosophical analysis reveals a deeper complexity. Our self might be more context-dependent and less continuous than we think. How should we reason? Imagine you want to distinguish between good and bad reasoning. It all starts with understanding the basics of formal logic, one of the big sub-disciplines of philosophy. An argument has premises that lead to a conclusion, and it's crucial to know if the premises logically support the conclusion. If they do, the argument is valid. If they don't, it's invalid. This distinction is essential for clear thinking. Consider an argument where you have a premise like, all humans are mortal, and another premise, Socrates is a human. From these, you can conclude, Socrates is mortal. This form of reasoning, where the conclusion logically follows from the premises, is the backbone of valid arguments. Philosophers use so-called truth tables to see how complex statements are built from simpler ones using logical operators like and, or, not, and if, then. For example, the statement if P, then Q is true only if both P and Q are true. Truth tables allow us to visualize all possible truth values of a statement, ensuring that our reasoning is solid. Quantification is another powerful tool. It lets us handle statements about quantities, like all humans are mortal, or some humans are philosophers. By introducing variables and quantifiers like all and some, we can create more precise logical structures. For instance, the statement, everyone has a mother, can be broken down into quantifiable terms, clarifying that while everyone has a mother, there's no single person who is everyone's mother. Moving beyond formal logic, we encounter inductive reasoning, which involves drawing general conclusions from specific instances. This is where things get tricky. Inductive reasoning is inherently uncertain because it extends beyond our immediate experience. For example, if you observe that the sun rises every morning, you might conclude it will rise tomorrow. This inference relies on the assumption that nature is uniform, an assumption that's deeply ingrained, but not infallible. Historically, thinkers believed certain causal relationships were self-evident, but modern perspectives emphasize that our understanding of causation is derived from experience and reasoning. Just think of the old misconception that the sun revolves around the earth. Probabilistic reasoning offers another layer of complexity. It involves assessing the likelihood of events based on available evidence. Consider a medical test for a rare disease. Even if the test is highly accurate, a positive result doesn't guarantee you have the disease due to the low base rate of the disease in the population. Understanding how to weigh probabilities correctly, often using tools like Bayes' theorem, helps avoid common pitfalls, like ignoring base rates or overestimating the significance of test results. In summary, reasoning involves a mix of formal logic, inductive inference, and probabilistic assessment. These tools help us navigate the complexities of the world, but they also remind us of the limitations and assumptions underlying our quest for knowledge.